So a warm welcome to everybody on behalf of the Media Department, Webster University Geneva. I'm Sarah Grosso and I'm an adjunct professor and researcher here, and I also lead our MA in Communications Management. And another part of my job that I enjoy is convening these spotlight seminars where we look into different topics related to media and communication and what's going on in the world at the moment. And something that we will all have noticed in recent years is that more and more memes keep appearing in our social media feeds. They seem to be taking on more importance in the way that we discuss and understand different aspects of political and social life. And in respect of that, to help us better understand what memes mean, I will live to regret this title at some point, I've invited two wonderful social psychologists who have been researching the meaning of memes to join us today to talk about their recent research on memes related to the COVID-19 pandemic. So my two guests are Dr. Constance de Laurent, who's a postdoctoral fellow for the Swiss National Science Foundation in the University of Bologna. And she's a social psychologist, as mentioned, who received her PhD from the London School of Economics. I'm sure she's done many other things, but I'm not going to try and read the full bio right now. Constance, please fill in anything that's essential. And our second guest is Dr. Vlad Glăveanu, who happens to be my colleague at Webster Geneva, where he's the head of the Department of Psychology. He's a specialist in creativity, imagination, culture, mobility, and collaboration, and also a social psychologist. And in the interest of respect of COVID regulations, the reason that Vlad and Constance are physically together is because they're also partners in life as well as partners in research and academia. So that's the reason for that. So the first question, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Thanks, Sarah. Thanks for organizing this. Yeah.
It's always good to talk to you. So it's one way that we can get together and have a discussion about things we're all interested in that join us together. The first thing I wanted to ask you, Constance, is what is a meme?
Well, the meaning of meme actually has changed quite a bit over the past few decades. Originally, it was it's a term that comes from Richard Dawkins, who was an evolutionary psychologist. And his idea was that memes are the idea version of genes. So we have ideas that try to replicate themselves and they try to survive the same way that our genes are passed on through natural selection. But over the past, I would say, decade, a bit more, the meaning has taken a completely different meaning. And now it refers to viral images. And I've prepared, let me show you just a little bit. I've prepared a few slides to show you what memes look like. And because there is actually a very canonical form of meme. And a lot of what we describe as meme is not a meme, actually. So canonically, a meme is a text and an image. And the aim is to be humoristic. So you have the cat here. The animals feature a lot in memes. The second one is a reference to the Teenage Ninja Tunnel. You know the one. Yeah, I never know in which order they go in English. With the little turtle and the map. And the last one, I like it because that's what I think every time I see a mention of Switzerland when I'm in online conversation. I'm like, yeah, someone talks about us. So this is the very canonical version of what a meme is supposed to be. Oh, and I always forget. Okay, good. And another big feature of memes is that they normally use a template. So the first one doesn't have text at all, actually, but it works because we all know the template. And this is what actually made memes a meme. It's not just the fact that the image were viral, is that a template would replicate itself the same way as genes replicate themselves, but with small modification every time. So this is a template I think we've all seen for memes. It's been like done in many different versions. And you have on the bottom right, you have the people who did the stock image that then became the meme, posing in front of it, because actually the image is 10 years old. So this has been going on for quite a while. Another big category of memes is memes that don't necessarily use a template, but use a viral event and try to tie to that. So the one we've all heard about recently is Lawyer Cat. If you have not seen the video, you need to watch the video. It's amazing. it's a lawyer in a court hearing in the US who got stuck with the filter of a cat, and it's led to one of the best exchanges that ever happened on the internet. The lawyer with the cat filter pleading to the judge that he's not a cat, and the lawyer responding, I can see that. And the judge cannot see that. He can see a cat. He knows it's the lawyer, but still. And so you had a lot of memes going on that topic. So breaking a bit the idea of a template, but still unified around a viral event. And I like very much the one about when your professor asked if you had a chance to do the reading. I feel this is always how my students react when I ask them if they had time to look at something before the class. But just one last thing is, memes now are actually taken in a very, very wide meaning. So I showed you here, this is the types of meme you see more and more now. The two first are actually text from Twitter. You have posts from Facebook and all that get shared. So they don't correspond to the classical image of what a meme is, but they get shared in a similar way. And the last one is a little comic strip. And you very often see content spread as meme that actually doesn't correspond to the template, but because the social processes that go around it are the same, we study them together as a meme. But traditionally, if you ask a meme expert, they will tell you that these three images are not memes, even though they became viral on some websites.
Okay, so you're both social psychologists. Why did you decide to study memes? And what does it mean to study memes from that perspective?
What do memes mean? I'm already playing on my own words. So yes, we are social psychologists, and normally people would expect that we do experiments, that we interview, that we have surveys, and a lot of social psychology is based on this kind of self-report or kind of fabricated, constructed data. And actually what's happening in psychology a lot nowadays, and we're very happy with it and hoping to contribute to that, is people look more and more at naturally occurring data. So we live immersed in a world of data. The data is basically everywhere, depending on whether you have a question, you have a method, obviously. And another feature, so there is a natural occurring data part, and then there is the idea that psychology should not be only about basic research, you know, asking the very fundamental questions, what is the relation between personality and intelligence and things like that, but be more applied to social realities and even to political realities. And this is something Constance and I are very keen on. And we notice, like everyone has, that memes are very humorous, but they're also getting more and more political. So we're very interested in that aspect. And just to pick up on what you said about the analogy with genes, I mean, I'm a creativity researcher. Constance is half creativity researcher, half memory, collective memory scholar. So we complement there. But you know, what strikes me is that in a very cognitive way of looking at memes and you know what traditionally they meant, there is very little transformation. There is a lot of emphasis on transmission. So you take the content and it travels from one mind to the other. And of course, there is an acknowledgement that as it passes through mind to mind, there are some changes. But what we notice online is that there is a lot of stability of formats and templates, but a lot of variability as well. So for a creativity researcher, it is enormously interesting to look at the everyday life component of creativity. How, you know, people talk about the mini C. It's not like we're discovering the cure for COVID. I mean, hopefully we would, maybe as we meme about it, but it's this kind of creativity that keeps life interesting and going on, if you want. So yeah, and then you have a lot of, yet another idea of mental health and the way we cope with memes. So that is yet another interest, maybe a bit less from the social, maybe more from the clinical part, but yeah, we're happy to chat about that as well.
Yeah, and for me, the interest was also then in memes, people actually build and share a lot of social knowledge. It seems like the aim is to be humoristic, and it's often very silly and very simple, but you actually say a lot about the world and about your environment in one simple meme. And this is something that we also found very interesting, to look at this very mundane way of constructing social reality.
This also links with the importance of storytelling in our lives.
Right.
That often gets underestimated. So the way you study memes, based on the paper you wrote recently, and we can share the link somewhere for people to access that information. But you study memes as kind of mini stories or partial stories, and by digging into the characters that are found within the memes. So before you talk a bit more about your approach, maybe you can tell us something about the power of stories in our lives. What is a story? Why are these stories so powerful?
Well, what is not a story, really? And that's actually a very deep philosophical and psychological question. There has been, from Aristotle, a lot of things go from Aristotle onwards, but indeed, Aristotle looked at the structure of stories as well, and then up to modern times, and Ricoeur and other philosophers and linguists as well. And in psychology, from about the 80s onwards, there was this big paradigm shift. I mean, we operate within it, of moving from kind of a more positivist way of understanding the mind as a computer, if you want, to understanding the whole person as immersed within a universe of meaning. And what organizes these meanings are stories. So basically, the simplest definition of a story is a succession of things that happen. Stories need temporality. They need a beginning, a middle, and an end. And if you think about it, that's how we organize thinking about our daily life, obviously, because we're immersed in time, about our, autobiographically, when we remember things, but also when people ask us how you are, what you're doing, you create a story. So there is a lot of interest in psychology, or at least part of psychology, in how we are storytellers and how we convey knowledge, meaning, how we build, creative artifacts through stories. So we thought of these images and we looked at them, and there is also another debate here in psychology between image and text. And obviously, psychologists are very good at studying text. We analyze it quite nicely, but there is much less in analyzing images per se. So we wanted to create a little bit of a compromise there and to really respect the image in its own right. But we didn't want to just decode it as a very traditional way of saying, well, is Donald Trump present in this meme? Yes or no, move on. And then we have a little table that shows how many memes have Trump and so on and so forth. We wanted to see behind the image, if you want, and even the text associated with it, what is the kernel, what is being told there. So if we follow this idea that we are storytellers, then memes contribute to stories. But we call them partial stories because we do want to recognize that this is not a complete beginning to end type of narrative. It's not a classical narrative in any shape or form. So what we did in this project, I'm going to talk much more, when if I get to show you a bit from it, is that we looked a lot at characters. Stories have beginning, middle, and end, but they also have characters. And memes, if they're very short and they represent like a snap, the kind of a short image of reality, they have a lot of actors involved in them who are in specific relations to each other. So there is always a story element to a meme. That's what interested us.
So your approach to studying memes was very much surrounding the analysis of the characters involved. So maybe you can tell us a little bit about the characters that you found, and what it tells us about the meaning of memes. And you're very welcome, if you would like to share some examples with us if you have some.
Yeah, we do have. But before I project, maybe we tell the story of how we started with. So we were all at home, like all of us are, and looking online, and of course memes keep coming up. And Constance, actually, you knew about that because you're more of a Reddit person, a Redditor than I am. But there is a whole community thread. I want to use the proper language here. Yeah,
it's a subreddit.
It's a subreddit. Here we go. So clearly, I'm a psychologist, and Constance is more of the media scholar. So there's a subreddit on coronavirus memes. And that was really as if someone did the research for us, at least in the data collection part, because people who are really interested in it, producing, sharing, voting, upvoting and ranking and karma scores, right? Karma scores on Reddit, yes. So it was really a very natural environment. We didn't have to ask people to make memes. They just gathered naturally, and it was a very popular subreddit. It had a temporality to it as well, from the beginning of the pandemic. And I don't know what's happening to it now. Do you think a lot of people post?
I didn't check recently, but in the summer it started dying off last summer completely, and I didn't check since if it went back. But it really had a few months. I think when the lockdown started and only it really got big, and then it slowly died off.
Yeah, so we looked at, we first started by collecting thousands of memes, kind of automatically or from the subreddit, and then we started focusing on smaller samples to understand what's happening within, what are the main themes. So we have another article that we're happy to share as well, on the general themes within memes. But one that was really interesting for us was the social, political, and social critique theme. So we noticed that a lot of memes were addressing societal issues and having quite a new angle on them. So that's how we selected a subset of memes. And as you said, Sarah, we started from the characters in order to reveal the story. And why we did that, so there is one theory that is kind of in psychology, a bit in psychoanalysis, psychodynamic. It's called the ego states theory. So Eric Berne, he proposed this theory where he basically says that in interacting with each other, we place each other in different states of the ego. One of them is the parent, one of them is the child, and one of them is the adult. So we move between these ego states, and when we interact with other people, we invite in them a certain way of responding to us. So if I position myself as a child, you can be either a benevolent parent to me or a more kind of persecuting type of parent. So his idea was that in every story, because he worked a lot on stories and legends as well, there is a triad of persecutor, victim, and hero. And this for me has always been a very deep idea, because again, if I go back to, if someone asks you, how was your day? If you don't have an element of persecution that you overcame or someone helped you, or you have no story to tell. I mean, people who say, well, it's been fine, you know, had my coffee and that's it. There is no story there. So he noticed that there is a kernel of this triad of persecutor, victim, and hero. Sometimes one of the elements might be missing, but normally they come together. And then from other sides of the literature, and also looking at the memes, we found that the character of the fool is very much present. So people who are gullible and you know, silly in what they do, and sometimes with very dangerous consequences. So we settled on this tetrad of memes of persecutor, hero, victim, and fool. And if we start projecting, do you want me to show you a few examples of
Yes,
what we
please
found?
do.
Yes,
Yeah.
to tell you a few stories, a few partial.
Oh yeah, tell us some stories. That's the best way.
Yes. So sit around.
Wait,
Maybe we need to close the sit around the meme fire.
Normally I'm
and,
showing the right one. It's just that we are not seeing the right one. Yeah.
Okay, so obviously there are some of the bigger actors, and here we have to acknowledge where this forum is and who participates into it, because that's another question when you do research, media, psychology. It's the fact that a lot of people came from the US, right? So it's going to be a very US centric at some point, but also very much China centric, at least at the beginning of the pandemic. So you have things like
no, because I wanted to add that the data we collected started in January until May. So the whole beginning of the whole first period of the memes, it was when the pandemic was mainly in China. So a lot of the stories were focused on that as well.
Right. And here you have when over 1 million people come to the protest, and you unleash a military grade virus on them. So I think we're all familiar with this kind of narrative, you know, so all sorts of conspiracy theories, all sorts of virus has been made in a lab theory. But here you have a character, the Chinese president, who often appears as a persecutor. So there is an element of intentionality attributed to the Chinese president, very often, or the government, not the people. You know, people tend to be victims, especially if you protest. So there is an interesting story here, kind of uniting something about the origin of the virus with a social critique about China's totalitarian regime. I need to click. Oh,
I always get this done.
And of course, in the early days of the pandemic, the WHO came in and actually didn't come in on time and didn't do the right thing on time. And there are a series of memes showing how China is basically commanding and controlling the WHO. So the WHO is presented either as a persecutor, you know, intentionally doing harm by not declaring a pandemic, not challenging, you know, China a bit more and so on, but also as a fool who's actually being fooled either by China or not doing his job properly. So here you have a very common meme template with the guy in a meeting who ends up being thrown out of the window, and this in a WHO meeting is the guy who proposes, why don't we just call it a pandemic? You know, that was just click on it, perfect. And then some interesting things happen because no story is linear. So there is no story in which the virus is always bad. China, the president is always bad. And then you have protesters or other countries who are victims. And you have all sorts of nuances and reversals. So what is interesting about stories is that they're very perspectival. It really depends from whose perspective you're telling the story. Who are you looking, at the situation from whose eyes? So here, this is another template with the which movie of the Avengers, right?
Thor.
It's Thor. Okay. Clearly not a popular media guy, but I know this is Hela, right? The goddess of death. Anyway, so the story is that if you know the movie, and clearly I don't very much, but she is very powerful and she's defeated by this other monster awakened, for that purpose. And the way this has been appropriated in the template is that China becomes this goddess of death, Hong Kong is Thor, now I know, obviously. And then the virus becomes this monster who is obviously a negative, type of character, but it becomes the hero in a way vis-a-vis the people who protest in Hong Kong. They, the virus is the one that can maybe, kind of challenge China. So you see here a very interesting sub-story, perhaps, to the main one. Then, of course, we go to other countries. And one of the countries that's been spoiled, with a lot of attention is North Korea. North Korea appeared quite a bit, and very often in stories that show how Kim Jong-un is obviously the ultimate persecutor, and in his regime. So maybe you're familiar with these, number of cases of corona. The moment you have one, it turns to zero, always the implicit assumption that people are being killed rather than treated. And I think it is true that North Korea, we don't really have data from it, but I don't think they...
But for a long time, they were saying they had absolutely no cases. I haven't looked in a long time, when it was, of course, quite unlikely with where they are situated geographically, and they do have some exchanges with China, so it seemed very likely they had cases in there.
So here is a proposition of a story for us in this meme, And then you have the reversal again. This is very interesting for us to notice when things get out of normal pattern. So here you have tourists spread the virus, and North Korea doesn't famously allow any tourists in. So it might paradoxically become the safest place on earth. So who is Kim Jong-un? Is he a persecutor, or is he kind of a hero just by accident, by coincidence? So that is another interesting take proposed by the meme. And then we go to the US. Of course, a lot of memes concern the US. A lot of memes have Trump as a central character. And if the Chinese president is often a persecutor, Trump is most often a fool, or a fool and a persecutor at the same time, because we can double the roles, obviously. So while the entire world was focusing on protection and, being very, very kind of quick about it, Trump was still saying it's a hoax in the early days of the pandemic.
I need to add that the reason we added the role of the fool was in large part because of Trump and Johnson, because in the memes they would come back again and again as a very specific type of persecutor that was persecuting because of their stupidity. And then we did have also a lot of memes looking at people not respecting measures as fools, so that we didn't add the character only for him, but that was a big part of the...
was a big inspiration, actually, the way he was depicted as well. And with it, you have kind of a societal debate around people who support Trump, especially. The title of this meme was about MAGA fans. So you have not only our politicians taking center stage in memes, but also the general public, the population. And we noticed that there is a split going on, between people who supported Trump, for instance, or support Trump, and who protest the idea that there is a virus, or protest the measures, protest the idea of wearing a mask, and then people who are more, on the other side of the debate and are very worried about it. So here it's basically new social identities, or new layers of a social identity are being added to these existing groups of people. And here you have, the MAGA fans making a line towards comforting lies. Again, this was in the early days of the pandemic when the severity of the crisis was being denied. And then you have no cue actually for the unpleasant truth that we all came to know. And again, in the US, a lot of social critique has to do with how the authorities reacted to the pandemic, and they are really portrayed a lot as persecutors of especially the American public, and their strategies of not testing, therefore not finding anything, which I think at some point Trump made very explicit that this was actually his aim, maybe reinforcing his role as a fool. If we go to the UK, very briefly, so there was North Korea and UK were quite present, much less than China and the US, but quite present in the body of memes, the corpus we looked at. And Johnson was the other leader who was presented just like Trump as persecutor and fool. And here he's a bit of a fool. Actually, you know much better the story of this meme template.
Well, I don't know if most of you remember this video of the pallbearers. You had these 4 people carrying a coffin and doing a dance at the same time, and it was superposed with images of the year. So what you can see here is Johnson. I think this one was from around when Johnson was hospitalized.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And all happy to see he has 4 new friends on Facebook. And actually, the 4 friends, these are pictures of all the 4 guys who were carrying the coffin in the video.
In the video, yeah. So it's kind of, you know, making fun of Johnson's at least naivety to be shaking hands at the time when you know, even in a COVID ward. And also his presumably very sociable nature, you know. So he's playing at different levels with Johnson's character, but warning that something quite bad will come to him, which he himself understood. And finally, there are other countries mentioned, just very briefly, give an example of Australia, and it's usually a critique of how the government handles the pandemic, or it's a larger critique of how the government handles other issues. So for instance, refugees or just visitors to the country. So here you have the Australian Border Force, who are famously very tough on anything you bring into the country, you know, justifiably so at some level. And then you have also the same border force basically letting people infected, you know, coming in. So again, perhaps a double role of persecutors vis-a-vis all these other people with fruit and veg coming in, but also a fool for allowing the spread of the virus. But the most interesting ones for us, because these social discourses, we're all a bit familiar with them. You know, Trump, persecutor, fool, Boris Johnson, perhaps the same. The Chinese president assumed to be, or at least depicted in Western social media very much as the persecutor. But we were very much interested in the social critique part of it. So that talked about the system or the government in general, or the way society is instituted. So one of the very powerful ones that I really enjoyed in a way is this idea that an average American can do a COVID test. Its best chance would be if he or she coughs on someone rich, because that's the way you would get to know.
That was the period where no one could get tested. But
Right,
I think it's
right.
when Tom Hanks got sick and we discovered that this kind of people, if they needed a test, they would get a test in 5 seconds when the rest of the country could not be tested in any way.
Right. So here it's kind of emphasizing this idea of the American people as victims, obviously, and of the entire system. And then speaking of new identities and new groups that come to the fore, you know, medical workers, essential workers, these are things that, in a way, the essential workers was almost coined, or a term almost coined with the pandemic, and a lot of different people entered into that category. But medical workers especially became very visible. This is from the UK perspective. You have the NHS, the National Health Service, and you have how people, you know, hold on to private hospitals for a long time, and the NHS is always, or systematically has been, a victim, not receiving enough funding, and as we know, it became the savior, obviously, in the story of the UK and the pandemic. But yeah, using yet another template with the jealous sad cat, you would say that.
Yeah.
I'm gonna be done soon. Sorry, I'm enjoying way too much showing you memes. So another persecutor in society are actually employers, at least in the early stages of the pandemic, who decided deliberately, we should bring people in and not really care much about the regulations. Or when they left people at home, they cut all the support for them. So here, schools are closing, events are closing, and when it comes to the job of someone, no one cares if you live or die. So this is really, who is the actor in this meme, by the way? In a way, it's the boss at the job, or the management at the job. And then it's each and every one of us who have to work, who have, there is a wide net of identification here. Everyone who sees the meme and has a job that forced them back to work or doesn't care much about them, this is the victim, this is the victim position being constructed. But then there is yet another reversal, right? Because we tend to think of these people, often people who go to work, who went to work even despite the regulations of staying at home or trying to be socially distant, as the villains in the story. But this is an interesting meme because it says, well, from my perspective of someone who has to go to work, even if I break some kind of rules going in that period, if I lose my job, I can't feed my kids. So what do? You're being high-fived, while drowning by the other club, the group of people in society who says, stay home, save lives, who might be speaking from a very privileged position. So in this sense, the people who actually promote the measures and want to protect everyone become a bit of the persecutor, at least because they don't make an effort to understand the life circumstances of others. And finally, there were some very interesting memes that took Reddit as a character. And that's interesting because it's a kind of a meta reflection on social media itself and what the role of this thread as well is in the whole pandemic. And this one is about, spreading panic over the virus, and then Reddit being slightly well, apprehensive, how would you call it? Kind of embarrassed and shy not to be identified as doing it. And there was another one that we have in our paper with the Trojan horse of misinformation, and Reddit kind of, and especially the thread, the subreddit we were working on, welcoming the Trojan horse with a lot of misinformation being spread. So here you have an idea that the community itself, the online community, can be quite gullible. They can be fools actually for allowing certain kind of points of view to come in, giving them a platform and spreading them, even in a humorous way, they can do some damage. So to wrap up, this is how we looked at it, and I hope that now you can see how, if you look at the characters and you look at the relations between who might be the victim, who might be the persecutor, who might be the hero here, who is the fool, you get a story out of that. And of course, these stories resonate with wider discourses and stories from the news, from, all sorts of media and so on. So yeah, that's what we did in this study.
So thanks for sharing lots of interesting memes and telling us about their stories and how they can be an important form of social commentary or critique as well. But I was wondering beyond that about the impact that these memes and their stories have on us. You mentioned earlier something about how perhaps it could be some kind of coping strategy as we're all trying to deal with this situation that we're together. So what kind of impact might they have on us as individuals, but also more broadly on societies?
I wanted to share a few memes, but I'm not sure I have them in the right order. Okay, I think, yes.
We're going to demonstrate them.
I'll show you exactly. No, memes have two big impacts, I think. The first one is I'm sorry, I think I have the wrong ones out. Anyway, let me start before showing the memes. That will be easier. The first thing is that memes allow us to kind of build a sense of community. So on that, they played a very positive role. And that's probably why in the meme Vlad was showing about Reddit getting a bit into panic mode. At the time when you had people living in countries, especially in the US and in the UK, because that's where most of the participants were there, it was a place to get panicked with other people. When you see your government is not reacting to what is going on, but you realize that something scary is going on, it was a great place to share your concern and to build a bit of a sense of community. It's also a great way to release some of the tension you feel with humor, because there was, a lot of the memes I'm sure were funny, but they build on some things that are extremely scary, actually. So that's a way of dealing with that tension together. But they also are a good way to try to make sense of the social reality we live in, especially when it's something very complex. So that's why you have quite a lot of political memes. I'm sorry, I have them. Yes, yeah. So I'm sorry, the first one was not for here, but the middle one you can see, for instance, people trying to make sense of what is happening with Trump and Fauci at the time, when you're the doctor, but the village idiot is giving the medical advice. So that's a way of making fun and criticizing what is going on, but at the same time of making sense of the situation and releasing a bit of tension on it. And the last thing is how you can actually make very complex reality very simple through memes. Actually, if you make a political critique of them, you can actually do something quite simple. I always forget I cannot use the arrow to switch slides. But the darker side of sharing memes is what I'm showing you here. Is the problem is that memes can be used to do two things. They can be used to spread misinformation. So the one you have on the left is around this idea that was floating around. It's a bit less the case now, but when COVID started, people started sharing these dates of elections in the US and pandemics to try to show that every time there is an election in the US, there is a pandemic somewhere. And it actually really doesn't work. The dates are wrong. Of course, there are every year almost you have elections in the US. It's a very big country with a very complex electoral system. So if you look at everything, there will always be something. But the memes were used to do that a lot. And especially here, this is presenting as something that was posted in a doctor's office. And we saw a lot of memes do that at the beginning of the pandemic, still now, but I see less of them. Maybe people don't dare share them with me anymore. of this thing about what doctor said what, about how you could deal with what is going on. And I love this little meme of Lincoln. The problem with the internet quote is that you never know how authentic they are. You can make anyone say anything online. So that memes were also used to give the impression to people that various experts were saying different things about the pandemic that they were not actually saying. So that was one danger. And the last one I've put here is a type of meme that we see less often because they tend to circulate in very specific area of the internet. This one is about Pizzagate, but you have some about a lot of other things. Memes can also be a bit of a gateway to radicalize people towards some conspiracy theories. So they start with some very simple memes about, this one was about how there were signs in the hacked emails of Hillary Clinton that this Comet Pizza place in Washington was actually a cover for a pedophile ring in the basement. The pizza place does exist, but they don't have a basement, and they, of course, do not have a pedophile ring. But a guy went there and actually shot someone because he thought there was really something going on. And so memes can also be used slowly to radicalize people because they use this very light, humorous tone, but can actually have very strong and quite dangerous political message to them. So there is a bit of there is a very bright side, and memes can do fantastic stuff to make us feel better about what is going on, to exchange information, to build a sense of community, but they can also have a much dangerous side to them.
And I just want to ask you a couple of quick final questions before opening up to the floor. One of those is that you mentioned that it would be helpful to policymakers to have a better understanding of memes in this way. What would you like policymakers to know about memes?
Well, the first thing is that they should stop thinking that memes are necessarily so dangerous. There was a few years ago, I think it started during the beginning of the 2016 political campaign, presidential campaign in the US. Hillary Clinton got very worked up about the Pepe the Frog meme, which was supposed to be a far-right meme used to convert people to far-right ideas. Now, it is not completely wrong that it was that, but at the time, the meme had a much more vague meaning and it could be used in a lot of different ways. And the fact that she went so strongly on it made the meme live a lot longer than it should have, and did radicalize the meme because of the way she reacted to it. So I don't think they should be afraid of them the way they sometimes are, because it actually sometimes make matter worse, but they definitely should learn what is happening in memes, because there are a lot of political stuff and a lot of things that are being discussed in it, and that actually can be useful to have an idea of what is going on. And the last thing that is a bit on a completely side note from what we said, but memes also raise a very interesting question about copyright now, because that's a lot of the debate around them. And there was a fear in the meme community that the new laws of the EU about copyright would actually make memes illegal, which is, it's not true, but that was a rumor that was going on online. And they do raise this question of who owns the original image. Are you allowed to make art and to make things from, a lot of them are pictures from movies that are copyrighted, but also when you have something that is slowly transformed by thousands of people, because each meme is creating on the other one, who owns the copyright? Who is allowed to do something with that? And that raises really interesting question about that I think, yeah, we should reflect a bit more on.
What about us? What should we know as individuals about these memes that keep circulating online?
Everything Constance just said. No, well, I think just picking up on exactly what Constance said is this double-edged swords idea, and the fact that because they can be so viral, being viral is part of the definition of a meme. there is an element of responsibility in a way that comes with them. Of course, you know, they're meant to be humorous and everything, but there are real stories and consequences that are being carried through the meme. So I think we need to enjoy them, but also to develop this reflective attitude, not necessarily a critical, but a reflective standpoint towards memes. And I think psychology and psychological theory and also media research and any other field that approaches them can widen our understanding of them. So you just mentioned copyright, you know, it's coming from a very different direction, but I think we need to develop more media literacy really around memes and the circulation and impact of them.
I couldn't agree more.
So new program and new course.
Thank you so much for a really interesting presentation. I wanted to leave some time for any questions that come from our lovely audience who've joined us. So if you have any questions for Constance or Vlad, please wave, speak, raise your hand using the small yellow hand up at the gallery. So I might not be able to see anyone.
I was wondering whether, because there has been information on the internet that memes have the potential to, let's say, change the perception of people with depression for a better approach to life. And do you think that memes have like any other social positive implications?
Well, we might have, thanks for the question, we might have talked them down a little bit too much, or, you know, because it's always this social political psychology is always a bit critical of things. But I feel, of course, you know, Constance mentioned the community aspect, the fact that you feel you belong, the fact that you feel that you can be creative. I think that that's another element. You know, everyone with a basic computer more or less could potentially create a meme. So there is an element of participation in the meme, and there is an element of feeling a bit empowered, that you add your little voice and your little perspective to a wider dialogue. So I feel that there is a lot that could be appreciated within memes, and it's definitely not all negative. Yeah. So for mental health, but yeah, I think that it should be done in a smart way. Let me put it this way.
Well, no, I think that's one thing we were interested in when we looked at the memes is that very often, so it is said that memes are meant to be funny. And one thing that we had observed with that a lot of memes give advice, and some of them give actually very sound mental health advice that can be useful. Now, when we looked at the memes on COVID, we didn't find that much, but that's something that deserves to be looked at, that there is a lot of also positive encouragement of other people when you do that. But another feature of memes that can be very useful for mental health is that memes work a lot on the idea that you're in on a private joke. And the private joke very often is that we all do something that is shameful and that we don't want to say, but we actually all do it. And so people can share in memes very private stuff about their mental health and make a joke about it. But the way it is helpful for others is to realize, oh, I'm not alone to feel like this. I'm not alone to not want to get out of bed. I'm not alone in having been wearing sweatpants since the beginning of the pandemic, and things like this that can actually be very empowering. Now, the flip side of that is that self-humor is really valorized in the meme community, and sometimes a bit too much. So sometimes people will be a bit too tough on themselves, and so they are not always very helpful for mental health if they push you to be overly self-critical and to overly criticize your group because you think that is what is funny. But globally, yeah, they can definitely help for mental health, I think.
Thank you.
Thanks for a great question. Do we have other questions from the floor? The floor, the
virtual floor.
The virtual floor of Zoom.
Yeah, I have a question. First of all, thanks for the talk. It was really, really interesting. And coming from like another part of the social sciences and anthropology and sociology, it was really interesting to hear also the psychology brought into the whole bit of it, especially with narrative. And I wanted to know if you all had looked at anything about TikTok, because with TikTok, you're also having replications of patterns of like either the same kind of audio recording being applied and people continue to reproduce it, or you have patterns of ideas, like especially like in the US, there's a lot of discussion about decolonization ideas, anti-racism ideas, and people sharing major aspects about like history that's not always shared in the textbooks, and it's really like exploded into this huge thing. And I say this as someone that does not have TikTok, but even just seeing it on Facebook, you see the things coming on Instagram and TikTok. So I wondered if this like kind of viral videos happening, if this also fits within memes, or do you think this is going to be something completely separate from that?
I think for now, we didn't study TikTok, but the person with whom we did this project, she's Joanna Literat, she's a media expert, and she works on TikTok as well, so she analyzes that. For now, I think it's really studied as something different, but the difficulty with TikTok is that it's a video, and already analyzing a meme with the text and images is difficult, but to analyze videos, I think they did a study where they had 150 video, and already just doing that was a massive project, so it is very complicated to study. But there is something very interesting on TikTok, and I think that's what she focused on political mobilization, and how people are now using these platforms to actually have real participation in society. And this is something quite fantastic, because all of these platforms and social media have been criticized a lot for either being a platform for the far right or being something where people get bullied and do very shallow thing. But it's never been, I mean, except in the Arab Spring, but that's a bit of a specific case. For everything else, it has not that much been studied as a place for political mobilization. And it's very interesting to see how it is becoming more and more, especially now that we're all locked down at home. There's nowhere else we can participate politically.
Yeah, great, thanks.
Thank you. Okay.
Any other questions from our virtual floor? Amanda, did you wave? Yes, Amanda.
I did. I put my hand up. No, I'll take it down. I had a comment and a question. So I did want to respond to the last TikTok versus memes comment. So hi to my media lit class. So a lot of the students here are from media literacy. I think that the TikTok versus meme is generational. That they do function in much the same way. They are texts that can be read. TikTok is more complicated in many ways because of all the moving parts. You've got video, you've got music, you may have text, there's a script. So there's just a lot going on. Whereas with the memes, you've got the image and you've got the text. So TikTok is a little bit more complicated to make, certainly if you're old, than say a meme. But I do think that they're texts that can be read. And from a media lit standpoint, they're just so interesting as these cultural units that can be read. So now to my question, and I'm also thinking about Sarah and your class as well. So I might also direct it to you. Do you also find that memes have become tools of interpersonal communication, that they're not just public texts, but they do go from individual to individual? You know, you decide to whom you send them, they decide how they react to them, you know, how to like, when to like, what multiple people get them or not. So they do kind of become individual conversations through image, which is interesting.
Right.
Just first to respond on the TikTok versus meme thing and the difference between the two. I mean, memes definitely reach more generations than TikTok does, but it is still, I think it is globally the same generation. It's just very different internet subculture. So a lot of what is happening on TikTok also went in there through Instagram, and is a lot more about how you present yourself. And memes come a lot more from the gaming community and people who don't necessarily want to show themselves on screen. So there is a bit of a different community, and there is a lot of, I know at least in the meme community, on Reddit, there are meme apps where you can find a lot of stuff from TikTok, but on Reddit meme, if you post anything from TikTok, you're going to be downvoted to hell. Like no one, there is a lot of content. No, but it is a bit of from the meme community, it's a bit of the TikTok are the popular kid and they are the geeks and the nerds, and they do not want to have to share their online space with that. So there is, and it brings something very interesting of the role of culture and how you create spaces for internet culture where people will share this space. So sorry, I wanted to say for that.
Yeah, and if I pick up, thanks Amanda, you've given us the topic for our next research, I think, because of course it's very hard with the same methodology, looking at the big forum to understand this interpersonal use, but we know it exists because we receive memes and we send each other memes
and
as
gifts
well.
as well.
And gifts, yeah, and rarely a TikTok somewhere. But that is an amazing question, and it would require a very contextual analysis of the people involved, the relationship, the meaning, all of that. What it brings me to think about, is, and that's where it's nice to use the story kind of overarching theory, is that stories are known for two things. One of them is to make the unconventional or the strange conventional and familiar. So that's why they're so powerful. The pandemic, no one knows, or no one knew at the beginning at least, what was really happening. So stories have this power, speaking also of mental health, and trying to settle us down a little bit, of ordering our experience. That's one thing. So they're very kind of inviting to the masses to make meaning. But stories are also very individualized because they have units that can be moved around and they resonate differently for different people. So I think that the second part of the project you propose is exactly looking at that other quality of stories to be kind of targeted and unique in their composition. The elements might be the same, but it's the way you arrange them and the context of that matters. So I would love to do that in the future. You probably need some samples of people who are willing to do a bit of a case study with you, I suppose. Open their social media.
But I think also your question points to the fact that there are a bit two meanings of meme. There is the meme as a very specific online community sharing very specific content. And when we use them in interpersonal communication, then the line becomes very blurred with TikTok, with GIFs, with everything else. And this becomes just a way to communicate that just includes images. And we are not used to doing this because for a very long time it was not possible. You are not going to draw little images in the middle of your letters. And I think it's just showing how we are adding layer to our possibility of communication with the fact that now we have online communication, we communicate in writing, and then GIFs and memes and TikToks all become layers you can add to this communication. And there the difference between what is video, what is a meme, what is not, it doesn't matter as much as the fact that you can communicate with this very complex artifact. You can communicate things with your friends and your family. And
right, so it expands the tools of online communication. Yeah.
To respond briefly to your point, Amanda, about how we share memes, actually makes me think about the role that media play in community building. Because indeed, on an interpersonal level, we do share memes, right? I might share some memes with you because we're connected. Which would likely to be of a certain kind that might reinforce and validate our existing beliefs and opinions. And there's been a fundamental change in the way that we share information and that we consume media. So there's this risk that we've probably all heard of by now, of this kind of echo chamber effect, that certain, your opinions are reinforced again and again, and that we may be less exposed or open to other perspectives and opinions. And I think we will observe this as well, right, in the kind of polarizing effect and kind of deeper divisions that exist between people with different ideological opinions. But this springs also from that interpersonal level of what gets exchanged and what does not get exchanged, and why we might do that. And I bow to the psychologist to talk about what psychological needs that might be fulfilling and why we might choose to do that. But I'm an anthropologist as well, from that perspective. That feeds into feeling part of a particular community. And then what does that do at a bigger political level? So I think these are fundamental questions in terms of media, how it's changing and how we use it differently. And as Vlad and Constance was saying, we're different research methodologies, you can get at different pieces of information. So they were studying the content, and a lot of it is about also interpretation, how we read memes. Do we have the reference to popular culture? Vlad, I probably would not have had that reference either, so maybe we wouldn't have been in the club, right? We wouldn't have got it so much as someone living in the same house as Vlad, who he's married to. So,
I'm fortunate that way because, yes, you can see I've exposed myself as, I do enjoy memes though, clearly.
Yeah, but you don't get half of the meme, I give you.
But that's why, yeah. That's why you need the interpersonal communication, right? That was the whole point.
I wonder if some of the debates happening at the moment make people in general more aware perhaps of the role of media in life and the importance of which information and opinions that we're exposed to in our daily lives. Do we, yes, we do have other questions. Amanda, did you want to reply? Did you put your hand up again or no? Okay, it's still Yemi. Fish and Yusuf, one or both of you would also like to say something.
Hello, yeah, sort of both of us. So we were just discussing, just right, actually jumping off the echo chamber thing, and that memes, like their lifespan and the longevity is very much based on like who's seeing it and how far it can spread out from its community, because the way the internet works is only you see things that you want to see. So how would that sort of affect the longevity of the study and how we think about memes in general?
Because a meme that is popular one day will be completely dead the next week. And so you're studying something that is, actually very hard to study because it's, a meme will disappear in a week. So how does that affect you guys?
Well, at first, the meme will die in the community in a week, but it will get recycled in other community. And very often what you have is that 2-3 years later, my mom will send me a meme that was circulating and I saw years ago. And that happens more and more. And it's quite funny to see now that more and more people are using memes. You get some old format coming back, and there's a lot of jokes around about the boomer types of memes and the kind of things that go around. But one way for us for people who really specialize on meme as a cultural artifact, yes, it means they use the website Know Your Meme a lot. That's the best way to know what is going on and what are the latest things. But what we were more interested in was in how people were making sense of the COVID crisis as it was unfolding. So it's fine that the meme is expiring because what happened about the crisis moved on as well. So we are very interested in this very in the moment, how people were using the memes to make sense of it. And it's funny because now when we look back at the memes from then, it's not necessarily the format that aged the most, it's the understanding of the crisis. A lot of the jokes about lockdown and all, they don't make you laugh in the same way now. When you've been in lockdown for 3 months, it feels a bit different than when it's been a year.
But also just picking up, and thanks for the question, if you look at these roles, there is an element of stability in the different roles presented, and sometimes even the characters who play them. But as you saw, I was talking about role reversals, and it's very interesting to see in time how these reversals happen. So actually using time to your advantage to look at the history of a phenomenon and its unfolding can be very, very useful as well. But you're right, this is a challenge, and it depends what question you ask. If you ask the question, what's trendy now, you have to really hurry to publish, probably do a tweet about it. But if you look at meaning making within its context and then derive certain general ideas about actors and relationships, that will have a longer shelf life. Yeah.
I have a final question coming in through the chat. Great, I love this. Which is actually a very good question that speaks to the issue of authorship as well and creativity. So what happens, hang on, where is it? If somebody's created an image, such as Pepe the Frog, that's then the meaning is subverted by someone else and it becomes a hate symbol, or it comes to mean something they don't want it to mean.
Well,
you have two strategies so far. The first one is to say, well, so be it. The majority wins, and it depends who took if it's taken by a community, there is not much you can do. You've had also cases of people trying to claim back an image. I can't remember of one in particular, but you've had cases of communities trying to fight back, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but you can try to claim it back, but you can't ever do it on your own. There is nowhere on earth someone can go and say, well, I made the meme, this is what it meant originally. Yes, they can do that. You might have a few journalists who will interview them, but globally no one is going to care.
Yeah, and it really speaks to this distributed creativity, which is another thing that I'm in love with, right? This idea that we are authors of our productions, but we're also part of a bigger system, and without taking anything away from our input and the value of that, absolutely, we're still psychologists. We do believe in the individual, if you want. I think the key to understanding this is to looking at processes that happen in between people, and I think we can get upset or angry at what happens to a production, but we have to remember that the same history of relations helped us come to the point where we make that production. So there two sides to that.
So do you think that based off that, memes could actually lead to changes in media laws?
In media laws?
Yeah, I think they will. I think they will. I think that for now, countries have been a bit slow to catch up, and what they've tried was to still apply the good old copyright laws. But I think it is definitely going to change. I don't know how, because it is a very complex problem, because I do think you still need to respect some intellectual property. But at the same time, the old way of saying once you make an image, it's yours and it's only yours is becoming a bit ridiculous now, and really is a way to reduce participation. And the same way as in academia, you have a big movement now to open science and to make all of articles freely accessible. I'm guessing that we will have something quite similar with images in one way or another.
But not just the use of the image itself, perhaps, but the way some people are depicted. We've been talking about characters. Do you think it could lead to any shifts in issues surrounding like defamation or libel in the way some individuals are being portrayed?
Right. I mean, at the moment, everything is under the cover of this anonymity created by mass distribution and changes.
Well, every time you've had a company or someone trying to make use of a meme to make money, that was defaming someone, yes, they got sued. So it really depends on the use, but I don't think people will get sued. I mean, it's online. What are you going to do? You're going to sue someone, and then you're going to have 100 other people. And the more you sue, the more people are going to react by sharing the image anyway. So that I don't think it's going to. I don't really see what would be possible there, to be honest.
We need a lawyer in our conversation.
So that which finishes the conversation with the amazing potential, but also the potential pitfalls of this technology that we have at our disposal, right? And how it is this double-edged sword, and it's up to us how we use it.
Right. But it's also up to us to educate ourselves, and you know, we have students in the media literacy class, and we try to work on this, obviously. But it's, for us, the message is the meme is much more complex than what meets the eye, and it's much way beyond just humor. And we need to think deeply about these things, you know, as social scientists or just people interested or media participants. I think that's the invitation.
But I think we also easily get afraid when there is a new piece of technology coming, and we get afraid of the use.
TikTok.
But I mean, a couple of years ago, everyone was terrified about deepfakes, and in the end, misinformation spreads extremely well without it, and no one is using deepfakes to make terrible things. And I think it's the same thing here. We sometimes get a bit too scared of the bad side, but ultimately, I don't think that we do only bad things when we're online and we're in groups, and I don't think we will do mainly bad things with memes. I don't know, I want to be hopeful.
That's a good note, yeah, to end on, hopefulness.
Well, if there's, I don't know if anyone has any final comment they'd like to make, including our speakers. Otherwise,
right, I think we're living it at hopeful.
And on a hopeful note, and with abundant ideas for our next research project.
Right.
Which I will happily participate in some way. Now, thank you ever so much for getting us to think more about memes and what they mean. I hope everyone has enjoyed the presentation, and we will try to share a link to the research if people want to read it in full when we share the recording of the event. But thanks ever so much for joining us. Thank you to our speakers. And thank you to those people in my department who support these events, as always, and Celia for her general event awesomeness and helping organize everything, and Tim, who's our technical wizard.
And you're everyone for the great questions.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks.
A great rest of the day.
Have a wonderful day, everybody. Thank you for joining us.